Coming off a historic showing in this year's Winter Olympics, Trump's State of the Union focused on entering a new golden age for America, while the Democrats attempted and largely failed to win Americans over for the 2026 midterms. We've got this and much more coming today on this episode of the Ben Corriveau Show. Okay, to start off with, we have the USA men's and women's hockey teams winning gold. Obviously, this is big news because the men's team hasn't won a gold medal in hockey since 1980. And this is even more impressive because we beat the Canadians. I'll probably put up the post that White House put out regarding Justin Trudeau's reluctance for us taking over Greenland. I'm sorry, not Greenland, Canada, our evil top hat. I'm getting a little bit overzealous here, wishing for Greenland, but Canada being our 51st state, and also about beating them in hockey, which we just did. So very impressive. The last time we won gold was, like I said, 1980. This was the Miracle on Ice. So incredibly impressive. Like I said, we also had the women's team win gold this election. So we really crushed it. Some would even say we killed it this year. And speaking of killing, we had another potential Trump assassination attempt last weekend. In this case, it was a 21-year-old man that attempted to breach Mar-a-Lago's security perimeter along with a shotgun and a gas canister, which it's hard to figure out why somebody would be doing this for any other purpose. Still no motive as of yet, as far as I'm aware. I did see TMZ News did put out that supposedly he was obsessed with the Epstein files and he believed that Trump was in it, and that's why he wanted to get justice for the victims. But as I said, there's still no public motive from officials yet. But that was absolutely huge, and I think that it's important now to talk about leftist violence because obviously this has been a problem for a while now. Leftists don't want to talk about it, but it is a problem. Political violence on all sides need to be condemned universally, but it's almost exclusively a left-wing phenomenon now, and there's not really people on the left condemning it. And the best example of this is a new meme that's come out. It's called the High School Kid Punches Ice Supporter, or the OK Punch Kid. This is actually on Know Your Meme. So what ended up happening was this school was hosting a anti-ice protest where students were allowed to walk out and protest ice, which is funny because I believe that this was in the UK. I might be incorrect about that, but they had an anti-ice. Oh no, so it was in Chicago. I'm sorry about that. So we they had this anti-ice protest, and one of the kids decided he wanted to have a pro-ice sign because he supported, like most Americans, the ICE deportations of illegal aliens because we need to get them out of this country. And in response to that, he had somebody walk up and punch him, and no real consequences. I believe he was suspended for a few days. But like I said, the left is making this a meme, and he's kind of their new hero, which is absolutely ridiculous, um, especially because of how much left-wing violence there is. And I mean, even The Atlantic, they have an article right here. Left-wing terrorism is on the rise. For the first time in more than 30 years, attacks by the far left outnumber those by the far right. And this is crazy because The Atlantic is already a left-wing outlet. But on top of that, the studies that they're actually referencing tend to underrepresent left-wing violence by either not counting it, misclassifying it as unknown or right-wing violence. In certain instances, they skew the method by which they're measuring violence. And I'll get into that in a little bit with the Cato study on this. But we also have the YouGov study. This was done September 12th, I believe. It was right after the Charlie Kirk assassination, where they analyzed several different factors related to political violence. And the big points that stick out about this particular study is that in terms of if it's unacceptable to be happy about public figures' deaths, if you're liberal, so very liberal, about 24% said that it's always or usually acceptable. put this in contrast with just regular conservatives, which is at 4%, or very conservative, which is at 3%. So that's a 6 times the amount of people are very liberal will say that it's acceptable to celebrate a public figure's death. So that's already crazy in the first place, because any death is sad, even if you don't like the person. It's a human being, human death. It should be sad. We shouldn't be celebrating death. But these people clearly think so. And even if we take the regular liberals, they're still double the regular conservative at 10%, which is, like I said, absolutely insane. This is why left-wing violence is happening and why it continues to happen. But in addition to that, they also said when political violence is justified, so violence can sometimes be justified. Very liberals say 25%. 25% say that it can sometimes be justified, and regular liberals will say about 17%. Whereas conservatives say 6%, and very conservative is, what is that? I can't even tell for certain, because the number between all yes and yes, it can sometimes be justified and prefer not to say are both hidden, and I can't get the results, but I would assume that combined is about 7%, so it's probably about 3 for yes and 4 for prefer not to say. So that's a huge difference between conservatives and liberals in terms of whether or not political violence is justified. So like I said, this is why liberals and leftists continue to attack conservatives in this way. And until leftists and liberals recognize that this is a problem almost exclusively on their side, it won't stop. Because if you keep on celebrating and making people heroes for this kind of stuff, they're going to keep on doing it because they want to be heroes. They want to be celebrated. But let's just go through some of the various instances of left-wing violence. So first we have the Summer of Love, which is funny because it wasn't very loving. This happened in the aftermath of George Floyd's death. We had, I believe, about 17. Yes. So at the time that this article was published, this is June 8th, 2020, there were 17 deaths from various actions within these riots, which is absolutely insane. I'll put up this study here as well regarding how much damage was done, but obviously the deaths is the big factor, because these aren't, in almost any study that I've seen, actually counted as political violence, because apparently left-wing radicals supporting their Black Lives Matter and not gender ideology, racial identitarianism, this isn't political violence, which I don't even know how you can justify not counting that as political violence, because it very clearly is. Another instance is in Portland, Aaron Danielson. I believe that I have the video. I'll put it up if I do.
Not really. It kind of scares me.
And this guy was a Trump supporter. He was walking down the street, and a leftist saw him, said, "Look, we got one." And then he shot him twice in the chest and then walked away. And I believe that the reason that this one isn't counted, and the reason for that, is because the person who perpetrated this wasn't actually charged. I believe that they died in a shootout with the police. If I'm wrong, I'll put it up right here with more information. But so that's very clearly political targeting, because he was looking for somebody who was MAGA, found one, and then shot and killed him for no reason other than the fact that he supported Trump. Then we can also look at Luigi Mangione, everybody's apparently favorite assassin, where he literally is being celebrated as a hero for killing Brian Thompson, CEO of, I believe that it was United Healthcare, I believe is the organization. I'll put it up here if I'm wrong about that. But yeah, he's celebrated as being a hero, and it's he's being celebrated because he killed somebody for leftist ideals. Like like I said, if you celebrate people doing this, one, you're part of the problem. You're causing this political violence and leading to more death that is absolutely unacceptable. And secondly, you're encouraging people to go out and do this stuff. Like, it's going to happen more if you don't condemn it, which is like I said, it's absolutely ridiculous that people don't condemn this stuff. We can also look at the two, potentially three Trump assassination attempts now. We have Thomas Crooks, the first one that we still have almost no information about, which is very surprising. I'm surprised that Trump hasn't pushed for more information to be released on him, but not too much going on about that assassination attempt. I know a lot of people say that, oh, we can't label him as left wing. Well, I would say we kind of can, because first of all, Tucker Carlson did a good overview of his previous actions. He was a registered Republican. His only political donation was to Act Blue, which I believe was after he registered as Republican. And according to the deep dive that Tucker did, which may or may not be correct, I don't know. I haven't validated all of his claims, but it seemed to be mostly correct to me based on the other information or official reporting that I have seen, where he was conservative, but then after Trump I believe it was after Trump took office in 2016, he started becoming more liberal and left leaning and being more critical of Trump. So I would say not only that, but also, I mean, Trump is kind of the conservative figure in America right now. So it's kind of hard to say that he was a conservative if you tried to kill him. But overall, I tend to lean more towards him being a leftist, but I can understand why people would say he's unknown. We also have Ryan Routh, who just recently got convicted of attempting to assassinate Trump, which that was another big one. He's the one who stabbed himself in the neck with a pen after the verdict was revealed. So he was a leftist. He was big on the Ukraine war and various other leftist causes, so I don't think that's very surprising. Then we just had this new one, Austin Martin, which we don't have enough information yet as of, like I said, whether or not this was actually an assassination attempt, what his motive was. But it's hard to think that this could be anything other than politically motivated when Trump is the conservative figurehead in America right now. So we have all that. We also have the Charlie Kirk assassination, September 20th or September 10th. So that's very recently, like only a few months ago that happened. And let's just pull up a clip of some of the leftist responses to that. We got Charlie in the neck, in the neck. We got Charlie in the neck. Charlie Kirk just got shot in the neck. Hey, ooh, ah, ooh. He had it coming. He only had himself to blame. Charlie Kirk got shot and he's dead. Finally. Thank you. Can we keep this up? Charlie Kirk was a fucking Nazi. He was a fucking Nazi. And you know what kind of Nazi is the best Nazi? A dead one. Thank God that shit stain of a person is no longer in this world. Bad people should not be in this world. Shot right in the voice box. I might be 1% less atheist. Okay, so you get the point. They all celebrated his death, which, like I said, is absolutely unacceptable. All these people should lose their jobs, because if you are willing to celebrate the assassination of somebody because you disagree with them politically, first of all, that's wrong. But if you live in any industry, if you work in any industry where you are working with people, any person who's a conservative can't trust that you will actually serve them properly, whether that's in the healthcare industry, the food service industry. A lot of these industries are built on trust. So if you can't trust the person providing you that service, the whole system doesn't work. So I really hope that most, if not all, of these people are fired. Obviously, that compilation was from September 12th, so 2 days after Charlie Kirk's assassination, those were the reactions happening. And I do know that there were quite a few people who were fired from their positions for their post celebrating his assassination, but I don't know about all these individuals. So obviously, this is a huge problem. Like I said, I just went through several high-profile examples in fairly recent memory within the past 7 years where leftists have clearly shown violent tendencies. But Cato decided to put out this X post saying, the risk of being killed in a politically motivated attack in the U.S. is low, a Cato study shows. Excluding 9/11 and the Oklahoma City bombing, most deaths come from right-wing attackers, followed by Islamists, and then left-wing attackers. So if you don't count all of the deaths from 9/11, which account for most of the deaths from political violence, you get Islamists as second place. What they don't say is, I believe it was like 3,000 people. 3,118 deaths if you include 9/11 from Islamism. So they're already heavily skewing the data here to make it seem like conservatives are the one. And that's why I find it so funny. This is Cato, and I believe that the C stands for conservative because everybody says that Cato is a conservative organization. Then they put out stuff like this, which is, it's very clear that they just use conservative as a pseudonym, so that way they can publish things that are anti-conservative and people can point to it and say, oh, wow, a conservative said this, so therefore it's true about all conservatives. This is not true in the first place. But let's take a look into the study. So first of all, their scope is strictly killings, which is interesting because they specifically say in most of their wording is about political violent attacks with a political motive, which is very different from what they're actually measuring. So that's very misleading in the first place. They're saying that the killings actually equate to politically motivated attacks, which are, like I said, they're not true. That's not true, because politically motivated attacks don't necessarily end in killing. They could just end in any sort of violence. But let's get that off the table. The other thing, too, is this is measured from January 1st, 1975 to December 31st, 2025. That's a very good range. I'm not going to criticize that too much. Political motivations of the terrorist killers are divided into the following categories: Islamism, foreign nationalism, right. So let's see how they're classifying right-wing political violence. So this is anti-communism, that's fair. White supremacy. So this is questionable for me because just like black supremacy, I would say that is more racial violence as opposed to political violence, especially since mainstream conservatism doesn't support white supremacy. So there's that in the first place. Anti-vaccine. This has lately become a recent trend in conservatism, but it has previously been associated with left-wing ideals. So over this time span, I would say that it's probably mixed. From what I saw, there was only a few anti-vaccine attacks in this study, and most of them were recent, so I'll give them that if that's what they want to describe it based on. Incel beliefs. So this is another thing. That's not actually right-wing whatsoever. I mean, because incel, if you don't know, is involuntarily celibate. Most conservatives are, if you're not married, voluntarily celibate, because a lot of us are Christian, and that's part of the Christian faith. So that's already very, very suspicious that they're adding that in there as well for right-wing. I can see it if you're talking about some of the manosphere influencers like Andrew Tate and men like him, Myron Gaines. But at the same time, that's not mainstream conservatism, and a lot of conservatives actually condemn Andrew Tate and Myron Gaines. So very questionable there. Anti-abortion, that makes sense. Pro-Christian, that makes sense. Left-wing, so this is communism. It's fair. Black supremacy, like I said, I believe that that's more racialism, but that is listed as left wing. So I'll include that in particular based on the whole Black Lives Matter stunt that they pulled. So I'll give them that. Anti-white, same thing as black supremacy, essentially. Only difference is that it basically encompasses all minority groups as opposed to just blacks. Animal rights, I would say that's kind of a mixed bag. I didn't see any prominent examples of animal rights attacks in this study, but I don't believe that it's a major player in left-wing ideology. Environmentalism, that's a big one, so I can see that. Then they have, as another division, there's separatism of various kinds, and then unknown or other. And then violent attacks against the police are ideologically categorized based on available evidence, but most are committed by left-wing terrorists. Men with incel beliefs are included in the right-wing ideological motivation category because those beliefs include social misogyny, anti-feminist, anti-women, anti-outgroup, and pro-hierarchy. Now, that makes absolutely no sense because let's take a look at what involuntarily celibate means. So involuntarily means not of your own will. Celibate means that you don't have sex. So if you are not choosing to not have sex, but you're not having sex, how does that relate to being a social misogynist, anti-feminist, anti-women, anti-outgroup, or pro-hierarchy? It literally makes no sense. Like that, they have absolutely nothing to do with each other. So I'm going to completely disregard that. But that's how this study was done. Like I said, pointing out all the flaws with this study, and then I'll go through some of the good things that they did. So there are only a few incel killers, so readers who disagree with this ideological judgment can make the adjustment themselves and see that it barely affects the ideological distribution of the killers. That's fine, but the fact that they're doing this in the first place shows that they are attempting to skew the results towards right-wing violence. Like, it just doesn't make sense to do that if you're trying to be honest about where political violence is actually happening. So we can also go here. Most of the terrorists in the unknown/other category have an other ideology, such as Thomas Jacob Sanford, who murdered 4 people in a 2025 attack on the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints meeting house in Michigan. Now, this is a very important one to recognize, as I'll state later, but his premeditated attack was motivated by his anti-Mormon and it appears to be anti-Christian beliefs. Thomas Matthew Crook's motivation in shooting Trump on July 13th, 2024 remains a mystery because he left behind no writing indicating a motive. However, his target was so political that the odds that the assassination attempt was politically motivated. There are only a handful of killers in this dataset with unknown motivations that almost certainly were political. These are the exceptions that violate the general rule of judging entirely the motivations of killers based on their writings rather than the target. Okay, so I already talked about Thomas Crooks. It seems like he was left-leaning, but there is no official narrative. There's no official announcement of that, so I can see why that would be unknown. This other one, the Thomas Jacob Sanford one, though, it's anti-Mormon, and some places have reported that it was anti-Christian, so all Christianity and not just the Mormon faith, which is more left-leaning than anything else. So I hesitate to call that unknown or other. But let's see. Let's just go through the rest of what they're saying here. So the hardest challenge in this analysis is distinguishing terrorism from so-called hate crimes, where an offender commits a violent or property crime targeting an individual or small group and is motivated by ethnic, racial, national, religious, or other forms of bigotry based on the offender's personal malicious opinions without broader political, economic, religious, or social goals. Terrorism is often motivated by personal hatred, but the attacker must be aiming at a broader political, economic, religious, or social goal for their violent actions in order for the attack to qualify as terrorism. Once again, I don't really understand why this is in this study, because this study is supposed to be, according to their own words, this is supposed to be about politically motivated killings. Not necessarily terrorism, but politically motivated killings. So the fact that they're inserting this here seems like they're also trying to bias the reader into equating the two, which, once again, if you're trying to have an objective study, you wouldn't include this language in here. But let's go through some of the various incorrect classifications that they have in this study. So first one is Hunter Nato. So he's the one who shot up Sky Meadow Country Club in New Hampshire. So this guy, he shouted, "Free Palestine," before committed his shooting. And this was classified as foreign nationalism. Never mind the fact that Palestine and the Free Palestine movement is a left-wing movement. So that's completely wrong to call that foreign nationalism. He was a left-wing activist who did it in the name of left-wing, promoting left-wing ideals. We also have Jacob Thomas Sanford. That's the one I was just talking about, the Minnesota church shooter. Like I said, that could very reasonably be considered left-wing violence. I could also see how it's considered unknown, but I would label that as left-wing. DC National Guard shooting. So this was the one where there were 2 National Guard members who were shot. And this was classified as Islamist because the shooter reportedly said Allahu Akbar prior to shooting the 2 DC National Guard members. But, as I said, this could also be viewed as left-wing because even though it does, I'm not necessarily saying that it should be classified as left-wing. I'm saying it could be. I believe that they did a fairly good job there labeling it as Islamist. But the reason that it could be classified as left-wing is because it was more in response to Trump deploying the National Guard to DC in the first place, which the left was rabidly against. So there was that. Robert Routh, I'm sorry. So is it Ryan Routh? Let me just double check that because I know. Yeah, so Ryan Routh, I'm sorry about that. He is not listed in left-wing violence. He was the second Trump assassin, and the reason he wasn't listed is because he didn't kill anybody. So that's kind of ridiculous because his intent was to kill, and it was very clear that that was his intent because he ran when he was spotted. So there was that. Vance Bolter, this one was classified as right-wing. So this is the man who killed 2 Minnesota, I believe it was 2 Minnesota representatives. I don't recall exactly their positions. And this one was classified as right-wing. Now, I can see how it was classified as right-wing because the targets were Democrats. But if you actually look into what he said, he believed that he was instructed by Governor Tim Walz, a Democrat, to kill these other Democrats. So I would say that he's more insane than political, especially because he was reportedly, according to him, following Tim Walz's coded instructions. So it's kind of hard to label that as right-wing unless you only account for the fact that his targets were Democrats. So there was that. We also have Nikita Kassup. This is classified as right-wing violence. This is the man who killed his parents to fund a Trump assassination attempt. Once again, not right-wing violence. This is being done to perpetrate a left-wing goal, killing the face of the conservative movement in America right now. Then we have Thomas Crooks. Like I said, I already talked about that. It was classified as unknown. I can see how it's classified as unknown. I would say it's more left-wing because Trump is such a political figure, face of the conservative movement. Like I said, I would highly recommend watching Tucker Carlson's overview of Thomas Matthew Crooks. He does a good job of laying out the timeline and all that. So that's good. Douglas Wade, UHDE, I don't know how to pronounce that exactly. This guy killed a Wisconsin judge and had a list of various other targets. Now, this was classified as right wing. His targets were both Republican and Democrat, so I don't particularly see this as being a partisan issue or an politically ideological, especially since it seems like the reason he targeted this particular justice and the list of people was because he had previously been sentenced by this justice, and he had overall grips with the legal system. So it's political in nature, but doesn't actually fit necessarily either the conservative or left-wing ideologies. So once again, another misclassification. Then we also have Robert Long. This was the man, he shot up several spas in Atlanta, and this was classified as right-wing because it was supposed to be violence against Asian Americans. That's what they claimed it was, but if you actually look into it, even AP admits that he was reportedly addicted to sex, and that's why he targeted them. So that's not political. It's not anti-Asian. His targets were Asian, but they weren't like, it wasn't political. So another misclassification. This is why I say that this study is so biased towards promoting left-wing and like saying that right-wing violence is larger than left-wing violence, which it's not. Because we also have Nunnelah deaths in the summer of love. So that's 17 more for left-wing violence that aren't included in this study. We also have Aaron Danielson being killed, another act of left-wing violence, not included in this. We have Santino Lagan. This was a shooting that occurred in the Gilroy Garlic Festival in San Francisco Bay. This was classified as right-wing. There's literally no evidence of that whatsoever. The only thing that this guy said was that he was in pain or he was angry. No evidence that this was political in nature at all. So I'm very against that actually being classified as right-wing political violence. We also have the Michael Knowles Antifa attack, that not included in left-wing political violence, where there was a couple that threw explosive devices at the building and injured a police officer while they were attempting to kill actual people there with the explosives. We also have the assaults on ICE that are included. So we have the Alvarado ICE facility attack. There were 11 people who attempted to ambush ICE officers. So that's not left-wing terrorism or left-wing violence. We also have the gunman who attempted to assassinate ICE officers and ended up killing a detainee instead of the ICE officers. Not left-wing political violence. The congressional baseball game shooting. This was in 2017, where it was anti-GOP. It was Republican Congress members that were targeted. He was a Bernie Sanders fan that targeted them. This isn't left-wing violence. We have the Brett Kavanaugh assassination attempt. That's not left-wing violence, apparently. And then, just to be fair, the Paul Pelosi attack, I had originally seen reporting that it was more ambiguous, but upon further research, it does seem like it may have been right-wing. So that's not counted in here either. That should have been included as right-wing political violence. We also have Josh Shapiro's house arson. That wasn't included as left-wing political violence because that was a pro-Palestine individual who believed that Josh Shapiro was helping Israel. He was too against Palestine, so he decided to burn down his house. So once again, all these instances of political violence aren't being counted in this study or in most other studies that conduct this. So what do you think the reason for that is? If every single mistake benefits a single narrative, it's very reasonable to conclude that that is the narrative that they are trying to send you. And that's clearly evident here. But that's enough for political violence. Let's just get back to, I guess, regular violence. Not necessarily a good thing, but we had the leader of the Jalisco New Generation, the CJNG drug cartel, was killed this past weekend in a attack, or in a special operations attack by the Mexican government. I believe some reporting says that it was in conjunction with the U.S. government. I haven't seen confirmation of that, but that happened, and in response, a lot of the cartels, particularly that one, the CJNG drug cartel, have been targeting civilian areas in their area of control, their regions, if you want to call it that. And so this has led to a lot of civilians getting caught in the crossfire, and particularly Americans, because this is actually a big tourist destination. So hopefully we don't go to war with well, I'm not going to say hopefully we don't go to war with the cartels. I don't particularly care if we go to war with the cartels, because it's not like we're going to war with another nation, like what it's looking like we might be doing with Iran. So today, actually, the U.S., particularly Senator or Mike Huckabee, he's now the ambassador for Israel, from U.S. to Israel. He sent out a memo today informing all U.S. staff that if they want to leave now, because it's looking like there may be a strike going on soon. Because not only is he saying that, but China is also urging its citizens to evacuate Iran. So it's looking like we might get into a hot war over there. I'm hoping that we don't, but at this point, I don't necessarily believe that there's any other thing that's going to happen, because the Iranians don't want to stop their enrichment of nuclear material, which I get it from their perspective. They want to be able to enrich more. One, so that way they, according to their claims, develop better nuclear reactors. But the real reason is because they want to develop nuclear weapons. I mean, it's very clear that that's their goal. Whether they admit to it or not, that's the primary reason for enriching uranium, or being able to enrich uranium, is to develop nuclear weapons. Even if it's for self-defense, the issue is that they are the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and we can't allow them to have a nuclear weapon, because we don't know how that's going to backfire on us in the future. But Trump actually mentioned this in what I think everybody knows was the biggest media event of the week, his State of the Union, which really highlighted the ideological divide in this country, because Trump was obviously talking about bringing America into a new golden age, all of his successes, and he played around with the Democrats a bit in this. So he got them to refuse to stand for the claim that their primary duty is to the American people over illegal immigrants. So that's, to me, that's political suicide there. Not standing for that, telling the people that you represent that you don't actually represent them. That should be political suicide, but I guess the Democrats don't think so. They also refused to stand for Irina Zarutska. She's the Ukrainian refugee who was murdered on a subway. Her mother was there, and Trump talked about that. And yes, nobody stood for her. Nobody stood for the Somalian fraud, to celebrate that Trump is cracking down on that by appointing J.D. Vance, fraud czar, I believe is the term that he used. No standing for there being zero illegal aliens being admitted to the United States, which is benefiting Americans, like across the board, because Americans are able to actually, one, get jobs that the illegal aliens were taking. It decreases the strain on our housing supply, because there are less people seeking housing, so therefore more Americans can actually purchase the housing that they want. So there's that. Some people, it essentially eliminates a slave class. So if you're big on that, then that's bad for you, I guess. But I personally don't support slave labor, so I'm fine with the illegals not undercutting American wages. So there's that. They refuse to stand for the tax cuts that Trump implemented, which you should be seeing fairly soon if you're filing taxes now, because it's tax season. uniting to end political violence. This was a huge one for me. And I think that this and the refusing to stand for their primary duty being to Americans are the two biggest clips of this State of the Union. Because while some of them did stand for this, which is good, I applaud them for that, not all of them did, which is, it's crazy because we can't even unite around the fact that political violence is wrong and shouldn't be happening in America. But like I said, based on our studies, the YouGov surveys, it's clear that that's how Democrats actually think. And then the final one is that they refused to condemn policies that allowed kids to cross state lines and be harbored from their parents to conduct gender transition surgeries, which is by far one of the most radical Democrat policies that there is, where they would allow you, so you could be a minor, if your parents either didn't want you to get an abortion, didn't want you to get these gender transition surgeries, or were previously abusive, the state had no legal obligation to turn you back over to your parents. And they would allow you to conduct whatever operations you wanted, whether that was an abortion or the gender transition surgeries, which is absolutely insane. And they refused to stand for that. So that was another big clip. I don't think it's necessarily as big because we know that Democrats are radical. But that was the clip where Trump called them all crazy. So there's that. But even that, so overall it was a big success. But the Democrats are still trying to spin this. Like CNN, this is the title of their article. Trump's State of the Union left some viewers unconvinced that he'll lower cost of living, CNN poll finds. So that sounds like Americans didn't actually like Trump's State of the Union. But if you read the article, you'll see that there were, let's see, nearly 2/3 of speech watchers said they had at least a somewhat positive reaction to Trump's speech, with a smaller 38% offering a very positive response. Not only that, but his approval rating jumped up from 54% to 64%. So he got 10% approval bump from giving one speech. And the people who believed that Trump had the proper priorities jumped from 44% to 54%, another 10% jump. So all this indicates that, yes, Americans did like Trump's State of the Union address, and it was successful, unlike what they're claiming here. So that's another left-wing spin on it. But this is what they do, and obviously they had to give some sort of response. And Abigail Spanberger, the new governor of Virginia, was tasked with giving this response to the State of the Union. And this kind of shows what the Democrats are planning for 2026 and beyond. She is the playbook for the Democrat Party now. And the concept is very simple. They run as moderates, and then once they get into office, they implement the most radical policies that they can. I mean, like I said, she's the governor of Virginia. Let's look at what she's done. So we have Executive Order 10. This was the 10th executive order that she issued while in office, which was, I believe, on her first day. Local law enforcement no longer will work with federal immigration enforcement. So that's step one. We now have HB 217. This is a basically universal gun ban. It's called an assault weapons ban, but it essentially bans any semi-automatic weapon. So you almost can't own firearms in Virginia anymore. We have HB 863. This eliminates mandatory minimum sentences on many crimes. She raised taxes in HB 979. And technically, none of these, as far as I'm aware, have been passed, but they are on the path to be passed because the Democrats have the majority in Virginia right now. And she's obviously governor, so there's that. Then we have HB 61. This one, I believe, did get passed. And this establishes a goal of 42% of discretionary spending on must go to small minority-owned or women-owned businesses. This is classified as SWAM, small women and minority-owned businesses. But not like not only did they implement this goal of 42%, which in a previous episode I've explained the economics of this, how it doesn't work. They have also specified that purchases of up to $100,000 must be set aside to award to these organizations. So, what is stopping from these organizations from charging them 999,000, or I'm sorry, $99,999.99? Because it's technically under that $100,000 number. There's nothing to stop them from that. So there was that. There's also a HB 781, which allows for a state vote for the constitutional right to abortion with absolutely no restrictions. So you could be one day away from giving birth, and you would be allowed to get an abortion. Like, absolutely insane. We also have, this is less radical, HB 612. This is a state vote for recognition of gay marriage, which the problem with this isn't that it's recognizing gay marriage, it's the fact that it's called gay marriage. I don't have a problem with them having the same rights, legal rights, as married individuals, but marriage is a inherently religious institution, and it's between a man and a woman. There's no way to say that it's between a woman and a woman or a man and a man. It's between a man and a woman. And that's my problem with this, but not super radical, especially in today's world. HB 1442, ICE cannot conduct immigration enforcement near voting centers. This was another big one. I'll leave it up to you to decide why that may be, but to me, it's pretty clear what the intention is behind that one. We also have HB 286. This one would require all National Guard actions to go through the governor, meaning that the president, as commander-in-chief, can't nationalize the National Guard without the governor's approval, which is already, that's raising constitutional questions because the state can't just decide that they don't want the federal government to nationalize the Guard. But there's that. And they are also, the Senate passed a bill to join the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which is a very, very radical policy because it seeks to eliminate the Electoral College without actually eliminating the Electoral College. So what this interstate compact means is that every state that's within it, if their combined electoral votes would sway the result in favor of the popular vote, they would vote with the popular vote for the country. And the reason this is a problem is because if you have, let's say, obviously Virginia in this case, you have Virginia, it's a purple state. Let's say they have, I believe that they have 10, let's just say, for example, I don't have it off the top of my head, the number of electoral votes that they have. Let's just say 10. If the Republican wins 9 of those districts, so 9 of those regions, they would therefore get all 10 votes in the prior system. With this National Popular Vote Compact, if every state in that would be able to vote or would sway the vote, then they will vote alongside the popular margin. So if the Democrats won the popular vote, despite the fact that almost the entire state decided that the Republican should win, they're just going to vote for the Democrat anyways, and the Democrat is likely going to win the election, it's crazy because they're literally going against the will of their own people. So that's pretty radical. But now that we've gone through some of the policies that she's implemented, let's go through what they will actually implement if they're elected. And I do want to specify that there is a little video that I did while I was out in Nashville for the Yeah Freedom at 250 event with Daniel Politics. I'll put up his Instagram handle so you can take a look at it. And I don't know if it's published yet. It might be published soon. But I basically talked about what America will look like in the future depending on who wins the elections. And this is how I know that I was right about what the Democrats will do. So first of all is the gerrymandered maps, which not really surprising, but we have California Prop 50, which passed, and this would allow for, quote unquote, let me just get the exact wording. So this measure would include a legislative finding that it is in response to redistricting in Texas in 2025, would, notwithstanding the authority of the Citizens Redistricting Commission, require the state to temporarily use the congressional districts reflected in AB 604 of the 2025-2026 regular session for every congressional election until the new congressional boundary lines are drawn by the commission in 2031. So they are redrawing the lines because Texas is redistricting as well, which I can see why they're doing it, but they're lying to you about fairness, because those two states don't have the same number of representatives. They're using it to get a political edge. And not only that, but Virginia is doing the same thing. They actually have a vote in April, I believe. Yeah, April 21st of this year. So if you're in Virginia, go out and vote no on this. Because the question is, should the Constitution of Virginia be amended to allow the General Assembly to temporarily adopt new congressional districts to restore fairness in the upcoming elections while ensuring Virginia's standard redistricting process resumes for all future redistricting after the 2030 census? Now, this is such a big deal because I believe that Trump won 42% of the vote in Virginia in 2024. I'll put up the actual number. But he won a fair bit of the population in Virginia. And now the new map would open up, I believe it's 9 districts. So let's see. There would be 10 Democrat districts and 1 Republican district. So that's a huge change. They're basically alienating all Republicans in the state, because right now it is 7 Democrat, 1 mixed, and then 3 Republican. So this isn't for fairness. This is to gain an edge that they don't have. And this is very clear based on what they've been trying to do, because James Carville, he's a lead Democrat strategist. He has, I believe, what is this, 2025? August 7th, 2025. We have to add states and expand the Supreme Court to save democracy. These people don't care about democracy because they lost a democratic election. They care about power. That's what they're trying to do. They want to exercise power over you. They don't care about what you want. They just want power. And I mean, this isn't even the first time this has been tried, because they've been trying to stack the Supreme Court for years. I mean, in 2021, they actually, Ed Markey and Representatives Nadler, Johnson, and Jones introduced legislation to, quote unquote, restore justice and democracy to the judicial system by expanding the Supreme Court. They wanted to move it from 9 to 13 justices, which would have given Biden an additional 4 justices, which happens to be enough to override what was the conservative majority on the court. Do you get to see why I'm so anti-Democrat? It's because they do this all the time, and especially it's just ridiculous that they do that. We also have obviously the open border support, as we saw under Biden. We have them, they were calling to kill the filibuster. This has been going on for years. Hakeem Jeffries even, I believe it was Hakeem Jeffries. I'll pull up the post. But he's even called it a racist measure because it was used to further Jim Crow, which, okay, that may be the case. But the filibuster is actually a good thing. And that's why, like, if Democrats take power, they're going to do that. We also have, they wanted to count illegal aliens in the census, which is interesting because I see a lot of fact-checking websites say that that's false, and it's not false. This is true. So in 2024, there was a bill, H.R. 7109, which would have amended the census process to only count citizens. So non-citizens would not be counted in the census. And Democrats voted against that unanimously. Why would you vote against counting? So why would you prevent the census from not counting non-citizens if you didn't want those non-citizens to be counted in the census? And this, while this does include legal citizens or legal immigrants on visas, they're non-citizens, so they shouldn't be counted in the first place. But illegal aliens shouldn't be counted, period. Like that, I don't even get how that's controversial. But they want to do it to get more representatives than they actually need. And this was shown in the 2020 census. But they're doing that to consolidate power, and that's why they're doing it. But the other thing that they've been pushing for is eliminating the Electoral College. And this is another thing I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to do, because most of the time, the criticism that Democrats have of elections is that the Electoral College is old-fashioned and has no use anymore. And they're completely wrong about that. I used to see their point a bit more, but after I read the Federalist Papers, I don't, off the top of my head, I don't recall which Federalist paper it is that discusses the Electoral College, but after reading that, I did get a better understanding of why we have it, and it does make sense to me now. But yeah, they've been trying to eliminate that for years now because they believe that it should be a popular vote, which tends to favor Democrats, although it didn't in the 2024 election, which was pretty funny seeing them talk about that. But that's all. So those are all policies that they almost certainly will implement. And like I said, I talked about that in the short video that I did, but this is just a bit more in depth with evidence. So you can see that I'm not just making this stuff up. This is actual things that have happened and Democrats have said they wanted to do. So if they get power, this is what they're going to do. And they're going to try to cement a permanent majority with that. And Republicans won't be able to win again if that's the case. But we also have, as more evidence of this shift in Democrat policy from being just overtly radical to attempting to be moderate and then implementing radical policies afterwards, is with Hillary Clinton, where she said recently, I think it was 2 weeks ago, that mass migration went too far. I mean, any rational person could have told you that. But that happened. So it's pretty clear. But speaking of Hillary, obviously another big thing that's happened this week is the Clinton-Epstein testimony of both Hillary and Bill Clinton. So yesterday, Hillary Clinton testified. It got paused because Lauren Boebert sent Benny Johnson a picture of Hillary and he posted it, and that was a whole thing because it was supposed to be private. So, I mean, there was that, but we got just about nothing out of it. Hillary basically said that she's never seen or talked to Epstein before. So, I mean, nothing from her. And then Bill basically just said that there was no reason, or had he actually known what Epstein was up to, he would have stopped it or he would have gone against it. Nothing really big about it. I'll put up his opening remarks because that's pretty much the bulk of it. We won't know for certain because I believe that the full testimony will come out tomorrow as opposed to just these little leaks that we've been getting. But overall, not too much new there. I'll probably report on it next week if there's big information in these testimonies, but we'll see. And that's all for tonight. So thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like what I'm doing here. And tune in next week for the next episode of the Ben Corriveau Show.